Thank you all so much for being here. In an effort to make sure we get through everything we need to get through today, I'm going to get started reading our opening and some guidelines for this group. As a reminder, my name is Kaylee. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the National Community Partnership Manager at Eating Recovery Center and Pathlight Mood and Anxiety Center. ERC Pathlight offers a full spectrum of treatment services for adults, adolescents, and children of all genders. We also offer free resources such as virtual support groups, events, podcasts, and more for our community. We have a lot planned in this next hour, as we do every week, so I'm going to go over the guidelines, and Emma will be pasting them in the chat throughout the hour. So our guidelines for this workshop include that this is a workshop, not therapy or a replacement for therapy. Please be open and respectful. Remember that we all come from different backgrounds and life experiences. Honor confidentiality. We do encourage you to share in the chat as you feel comfortable, and when responding to prompts from our facilitator, Joni, she'll be asking questions throughout the hour. Grief, we know, can be a really heavy topic, and we want to encourage you to take care of yourself as needed. Stretch, snack, water, leave if needed during group, and make plans for yourself for self-care after group or when doing the assigned activities. Always make sure that you're taking care of yourself first. So welcome to week 4 of our Grief Relief series with Joni Dwyer. As a reminder, this recording will be available at the end of group. All of them will be available for you to look back and review for continuing to learn and go through your grief journey. And with that, I will pass it over to Joni.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be with you again this week. I hope you had a good week. I loved reading the chat this week. There was so much support. So cool around those topics. You know, the thing about grief everything about it is difficult. The topics are deep and the pain is deep, and it can just be so brutal that one of the things I wanted to say from the top is you guys have so much courage. You keep showing up. Way to go. You show up for this. You show up for your life. You should feel really good about yourself for doing that. This is really difficult stuff, and not everyone will be willing to do this kind of work. But wow, the payoff is so worth it. I'm telling you from my own experience of not processing grief for years and then processing grief. It pays off in ways that nothing else seems to pay off the way this will. So I really do mean that. I congratulate you for hanging in there and for showing up and for honoring yourself and your feelings and what you're going through. And I want you to be kind and considerate with yourself and everybody else. Take it easy, slow down, check in with yourself, and move slowly. You don't have to hurry. In fact, there's no reward for speed. So today we're going to take 2 more topics, but first we're going to talk about last week a little bit of homework. Let's review that. So this was the homework assignment. We talked about ritual and using it as a tool in this particular case to let go of something or someone. How did that go for you? What did you think? I love the talk on the chat of the different resources that people have found where you can go and do this kind of work, right? You can do it yourself someplace anywhere you want to. Oftentimes I wind up by the lake. There's a big lake in town here, and I often wind up close to water. Water somehow is really important in my life. It calms me, it soothes me, and so that's where I tend to go do any kind of ritual. So how did that go for you? Did you find some things this week? Did you think of something that you would like to let go of, or that you would like to do some kind of ritual for? What about anger? Did you learn anything new about that? Did you learn something while you were answering your questions? How you've been hurt by anger, or how you've hurt others with your anger? That's a possibility too. And if so, why do you use anger? You know, anger is our most protective feeling. So it'll often come up when we're sad. We'll often wind up angry instead of sad because anger has some energy in it and sadness doesn't. So we can go that direction. And then trying to figure out what can I do? What can I do differently? If anger is an issue for you, what can you do differently? And then we had all of those suggestions to how to do that. So let me know how that went for you, would you, in the chat? So here's what we're going to do this week. We're going to, as I mess around here with this PowerPoint, we're going to talk about two more big subjects. One of them is guilt. The other one is forgiveness. And so here's what I would like to preface with. Take what you like and leave the rest. See if there's something in here that might help you and whatever it is that you need. Okay? All right. This information, I was checking out some information and I just thought these points are so true, that death or significant loss often causes us to look back. We reminisce, we remember the relationship, right? We need an ending before we have a beginning. The story ended for my husband, right? His story on earth ended. And I looked back to tie the parts together to build a cohesive story that made sense to me, right? This remembering, this reminiscing is really important. And the hard part is that the very thing that brings me joy, all of those memories, those good memories that I always get to keep, I will never let go of those memories, I never have to, are the very things that also make my heart ache because I miss them. And that's so true so often in grief. It's very confusing and it's often contradictory. And it's just the mystery of grief. There just has to be an acceptance that we're just messy in grief, and that's the way it is. Remembering the past is what makes a future possible. Because as we do this work, as we remember, as we work through this pain, then our hearts can heal. And we can see that there's possibility of a future. When I first started that journey, I could not see that. So what I did was I relied on other people who have been there and could tell me, no, it is possible, hang in there. So that's what I'm telling you, is it is possible. The key is not to get stuck in the past, right? And we will often do that. Guilt is one of those places, boy, that we can absolutely get stuck in the mud. And so that's why we're going to talk about it. Befriending and integrating guilt feelings is so important because we won't be able to move forward without doing so. So let's get to it. Guilt. Now, a lot of times we'll use guilt and we mean shame and regret. So we're going to break that up a little bit and get some good definitions going. So these feelings are, I think, probably one of the most difficult and companions with death and significant loss. So guilt, shame, and regret are common and natural in grief, right? If you've got these feelings, you've actually developed a sense of right and wrong, and you care about others in your relationships. So these feelings can be lightened if we give them attention and process them in a positive way, right? We can process them in a not positive way, and it winds up just hurting us more. So that's why we really want to address this. Often guilt, shame, and regret are kept secret because we feel ashamed. Did you guys ever experience that? I certainly did. When my dad died, I thought I should have kept him from going to work that day. I was 14. He died in an accident where he worked. I should have kept him from going to work that day. He wouldn't have died. Right. And I felt so ashamed that I didn't do that. Now, that's called magical thinking, right? That's the term for it. It doesn't make any sense why I would think to keep him from going to work, but it doesn't matter. This stuff doesn't have to make sense. But I kept that within my little 14-year-old body for a full year before I said it out loud, right? And when I did, the people I said it to said, why would you think that was the case? That makes no sense. And I said, well, I guess it doesn't, does it? Right? And it could vanish. But until I said it out loud, until I didn't keep it a secret, that's often the key, is that when we feel guilt, shame, and regret, we wind up keeping it a secret and carry the shame of it. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So to heal in grief means to become whole and integrate your grief within yourself, right? We find a way. I have repositioned Chad someplace in my heart, right? And my mom within my heart. And I just carry them with me. Same way I do my grandparents, right? It's been years. It doesn't matter. Everything that they gave me, put into me, loved me, I love them, is still with me. I would like them back, but that's the truth. I can't get them back. It is what it is, and there's got to be a way through. And this is part of that way through. So what processing grief does is it allows us to embrace a new way of living, and it brings fullness and meaning to our lives. To heal, we need to understand and befriend our feelings. I know I keep saying this, and I will keep saying it. Move toward them. That's what that means. Befriending means to move toward your feelings, not away from them. Face them, process them, get help doing it, right? In this way, we can come to a place where we can let go of the pain, not the person. We're not going to let go of the person. So again, it allows our feelings to soften and we can move through and beyond them. Yeah. So let's get some definitions. Guilt. That's when we act against our own values or someone's we respect. It has to do with behavior. If you're saying, if only I hadn't, that's usually guilt talking. Shame is the toxic cousin of guilt, right? It's a feeling of unworthiness. I love Brene Brown and the way she defines things. She's really good at defining. And she says, guilt says I did something bad. Shame says I am bad, right? Shame is destructive and disabling. It focuses internally and is based on misunderstanding our own self-worth. Doing something bad is not the same as being bad, right? Shame is honestly, shame is the only feeling, I'm thinking this through as I say it, shame is the only feeling I can think of that I would throw out. Yeah. The rest of them we want to honor and look at. And we also will look at shame because it's important to recognize, is this guilt or is this shame? Is this regret or is this shame? Because it's one thing to make a mistake. It's one thing to do this. We make a choice that's unbeknownst to us that's later is going to cause us harm or pain. So if we're saying, I wish I had, or I wish I hadn't, that's regret. And that's different from guilt. Guilt is, I did something wrong. I knew it when I did it. And I need to do something about that. Regret is, I didn't know I was doing anything wrong. I wish I had said this. I wish I had told them how much I love them. I wish I had spent more time with them. I wish I'd answered that phone call. That's regret. Or I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't stayed away. Whatever it is, that's regret, right? So we really need to define what it is we're dealing with. And there's different ways to deal with these two things. So a lot of times we just say guilt and all of these things are in there. But regret is hindsight. It's 2020. When you look in the rearview mirror, you can see 2020. Oh, I should have. This is what this looked like with me. I should have gotten my husband to go to the doctor sooner. Right? That was my regret. And I was really stuck there. And I hear a lot of people with regret. But the way they say it, of course, is I feel so guilty. I should have. I wish I had. I wish I hadn't. So it hinders us from resolving grief, circumstances surrounding the loss. I have a friend whose husband died from COVID, and he would not go to the hospital. He would not let her call the paramedics. And he got sicker and sicker. 4 days in, he could hardly breathe. And she said, I am calling the paramedics. She called them, and he passed away just as they arrived. So you can imagine what she's stuck with, right? The regret of not just not listening to him and going ahead and calling, but she respected him. She always respected him. So of course she wouldn't think that this was going to happen. So she has worked through that, but it's taken her a while to move through that space. Unresolved issues in the relationship. Sometimes that's the biggest thing that hinders us from getting rid of the guilt. Sometimes we wish we could have had a better relationship with that person, when the truth may be that they weren't able to have a healthy relationship with us. A lot of times I hear that a lot. I should have done more. Now, I've heard things like my dad was alcoholic and abusive, and the only thing I knew to do was stay away from him because he was so toxic in my life. But I should have done it anyway. I should have just stayed in relationship with him. But the truth of that is he was not able to have a healthy relationship with you or with my friend. And she was grieving what she didn't get in the relationship. And a lot of times that's the thing to concentrate on. I am so sad about what I didn't get in the relationship, not the guilt of I should have done this differently and we could have had a great relationship. In fact, when my dad died, I carried that, of course, as a treasured wound for a long time before I worked on it, before I started healing. And I said to a counselor one time, if my dad had lived, we could have had a great relationship when I was an adult. He could have known me as an adult. And he said, well, what if his PTSD didn't get better and he could not have a good relationship with you? And it shocked me. I said, well, I never thought of that, right? That was just the reality of the situation. That was really helpful for me. So I could let go of that shattered dream, right? Forgiving ourselves, a lot of times that will hinder us if we just are unforgiving about ourselves. And we'll talk about that a little bit as well. Sometimes we feel a lot of guilt because it's lessons that we learned as a child or an adult about guilt, right? Sometimes in families, guilt trips are constant. And a lot of people are taught that they make a mistake, they should feel horrible and they should feel guilty and they carry guilt with them. Or something's happened in their lives, usually when they're young, that creates guilt and they carry it around with them, right? And that was me as an adult for a long time, right? I could have said, hi, I'm Joni and I'm sorry, because I was so sorry for everything. I feel guilty about every mistake I made, right? I did not consider I was a human being and that mistakes were something to learn from. I just thought I wasn't supposed to make them, right? And honestly, that wasn't the case in my family, but I had a traumatic experience when I was a child, and that's what came out of that. So these are really good things to talk to your counselor about. Self-talk. Oh my gosh. How do you talk to yourself? What does that sound like? right? We'll go over that a little bit too in just a second. So in fact, let's do self-talk now. So here's what it is. It is our internal dialogue, how we speak to ourselves, right? It can be positive or negative. My guess is that most of the time it's negative. It can be accurate or inaccurate. We carry guilt, and those messages are usually distorted and destructive, right? Self-talk influences our self-concept. It's how we see ourselves. This I thought was fascinating. Most people speak at a rate of 150 to 200 words a minute. Internal dialogue, 1,300 words a minute. Imagine how we can destroy ourselves in a minute by how we talk to ourselves. So that can be a real big barrier to healing. So that's one of the things I'd love for you to do this week is pay attention to how you're internally talking to yourself, right? What do you call yourself things? Do you reinforce it? Right? When you make a mistake, is it, oh, I am so stupid? Pay attention to what you say to yourself, right? It's very interesting. Would you talk to a good friend that way, or a loved one, or a child, the way you talk to yourself? This is how you can check it out. So please remember to offer grace, compassion, forgiveness, and love to yourself as well as other people. And I had a very interesting time doing that, thinking about the way I was talking to myself. And when I found it, I would make it ridiculous, like, oh no, you're not stupid. You just made a mistake. I mean, just corny, just any way that I could get myself to realize, goodness gracious, you're so negative about yourself when you can be so positive with other people. Yeah. Anybody relate to that? Okay. Pay attention this week. Let me know what you think. So here's some ideas for working through guilt. So what do we do with it? So we've got this guilt, we got this regret going on. And one of the things I found is to write or contact the person you've wronged and apologize. If you've got guilt going, right? Oh, let me come back here. Not so fast. Unless it's going to hurt the person more. So you need to work through this first with your counselor, with a reliable support person. I'll give you an example. I had a friend who had an affair, and she said, and they broke up, and the couple went back together. The other couple went back together, and were working on their marriage. And she said, "I want to contact the wife and apologize." What do you think? And I said, I think that's a good idea because I think it will hurt more than help the person that you wronged. This is really important stuff. Yeah. Because when we feel guilty, what we want to do is get rid of our guilt. But have you ever had somebody dump all their guilt on you and then they go, whoo, I feel better. And you're destroyed, right? It's not okay. So if that's the case, that you're going to hurt the person more, you've got to find a different way to do that, right? And one of the ways you can do it is you can do something anonymously, some kind of anonymous good deed in their name. You can work through it and say, what drove me to do something that I knew I shouldn't have done, that was going to hurt somebody? What was going on with me? Analyze it. Look at it. What was going on with me that made me do that? Because when you can learn from your mistakes, that's really, man, that is making amends, right? There's a difference between apologizing and making amends. Apologizing is saying you're sorry. Making amends is some kind of restitution. Sometimes it's doing something for somebody else, right? If you borrowed money and you didn't pay it back, pay it back. Find a way to pay it back, right? Those kinds of things. There's two different things going on there. I tell you more about that when I tell you my other story in a minute. Okay. Hang in there. More to come. If your person's passed away, you can write them letters whenever something comes to mind. And this is what I did with my regret is if I thought, oh, honey, I wish I had told you what a great father you are. I wish I had said that more. I just wrote him a letter and said that. And I had a really cool looking box that I put all my letters in to Chad, right? Same thing. My mom's letters went in there, all of that. And I mean, I did this. I probably did that every other day. I thought of something else. And we had talked so much that I thought wouldn't have any regrets, but boy, the shoulda, woulda, couldas the minute he died. So all the things that I could think of, I would just write them. I'm so sorry I didn't push you harder to go to the doctor. That was a biggie because I found myself in a support group saying, I don't deserve to be happy. And fortunately, somebody in the group said to me, why are you saying that? And I said, because I didn't get him to the doctor. I couldn't push him hard enough to get him to the doctor. And so then we had a conversation about that. So you could keep him alive? Maybe. I mean, it healed my heart to say it out loud, right? Had I not gotten a chance to discover that, I would have jeopardized any possibility of being happy. That's how guilt can hold us. That's why this stuff is so important. So I wrote letters. This is months, right? Because it takes as long as it takes for us. It is unique for each one of us. Some people can move through quicker. I happen to have to process things slower. And so that's really important to accept your process, accept the way this works for you. Okay. So what I would do is I wrote letters, and then one day I did this. When it was time, when it felt right, I wrote the letter back that I felt he would write to me in his wholeness. Because honestly, that's the way I see Chad now. He's free of this world, and he has a wholeness about him. And I put pen to paper. You know, I knew him pretty well. We were married 33 years. So I put pen to paper and I just wrote what I thought he would say to me in his wholeness. Oh my goodness. That was so good. That was so healing because I knew it was true when I wrote it. I did the same thing with my mom. And I knew that's exactly what she would say to me. That was a game changer for me. There's another, talk to your trusted people about your feelings of guilt, shame, and regret. It's really important. Journal about them. Describe what you would do if you had it to do over again, right? This is what I would do. Again, it's that idea of learn from it. Learn from this experience. Because that's what our feelings do. They give us messages. And if we can learn from them, we can have a fuller life, a richer life. And talk to someone to get clarity about this. Okay. So now let's talk about forgiveness. It should follow on the heels of guilt, don't you think? Here's a good definition. Giving up forever the right of retaliation and compensation, right? I like this one. Giving up my right to hurt you for hurting me. That's Dr. Archibald Hart. Forgiveness is a decision we make. We often think it's a feeling. And of course, there's a certain feeling that goes along with forgiveness. And we'll talk about that. But forgiveness is a decision we make. And it's also a process, and often a long process, right? So why don't we want to forgive? I bet you guys could fill up the chat with that one, right? Because what happened to us was wrong, and often very wrong. The offender doesn't deserve to be forgiven. That's true. right? These things are true. There should be justice. I like justice. So I have a hard time with forgiveness. There should be justice. The offender should be held accountable for their actions. Absolutely. I don't want to let them off the hook. And then oftentimes we'll say, I'm not going to forgive them until they apologize. Right? Anybody got any more reasons? If you do, put it in the chat. But these were some of my reasons, right, for not forgiving. And they're all legit, except it keeps us stuck. So what's wrong with unforgiveness? What's wrong with not forgiving? Let's talk about that. Because it leads to a life of repeating the pain of the offense every time we think of the offender. Here's what that looked like in my life. It fosters chaos in our being. It causes bitterness to grow. It stunts our growth. And it doesn't create justice because we hang on to it, right? We aren't keeping anybody on the hook but us. You know that old saying of unforgiveness is like drinking poison and waiting for the other guy to die. Yeah. We're the ones. We're locked in our own jail and we have the key. My favorite cartoon is this cat, and he's standing, Garfield the cat. He's walking by a pet shop one day, and he looks inside and he sees all of these animals in cages, and he then sees the owner go in the back. So he sneaks inside, he opens all the cages, and he says, "You're free, you're free." And all the animals huddle back in the corner of the cage. And in the next frame, he walks in, he closes all the cages, and he says, "You're safe, you're safe." Right? That's the way I felt when I was carrying a lot of unforgiveness. So we have a choice. We don't have to forgive, but this is what it looks like in our lives. And bitterness, it's real hard to finish well. We're going to be bitter or better. And there's really nothing in between. And so that's why I pay attention to this, even when I don't want to. So it also keeps us mired in anger and sadness. There is no peace, no gratitude, no joy. It wastes our precious time and it gives us a sucky life. I don't know about you guys, but that was my experience and is my experience, right? Because oftentimes we have ongoing need to forgive. But this is what, a lot of times it's our misunderstanding of forgiveness. It doesn't mean we don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean that we necessarily reconcile with the offender. And we need nothing from the offender to forgive. We don't need an apology. We don't need anything. We possess all we need. The power is right here in us to do this. All we need is right here. Yeah. So let's figure out how. How do we forgive? What's involved in it? Now, let me tell you my little quick story and what this looked like in my life with a very big forgiveness. This was a biggie. My mom, I think I told you, my mom, 4 years after my dad died, married this really nice, kind of confusing man. He was really nice and a lot of fun. And he turned out to be a con artist, and he took us financially, wiped us out in 1 year. My poor little mom, right? My twin and I were 18, and my younger sister was 14 and just starting high school. We were really cooperative with each other. We just collaborated well, and so we just did our best and did what we could, started over. 20 years later, I'm doing a study on forgiveness, and I realized that I'm going to have to forgive him, that he's on the top of my list. And honestly, my reaction was not that jerk. I'm not going to forgive him, right? So of course that was the one I knew I had to forgive if I was going to have peace, because every time I thought about it, there was this hit of anger. Oh, I was so mad, right? Just this zing of anger. So I had read a book 20 years earlier that, of course, I love that. You know, when things come back to you that now have use and you didn't know why you were reading it then, but there it is right in front of you. And so this is what I did. I set my intention to forgive him. And then I realized I was really going to have patience with this process. That's so important because, you know, a lot of times we'll ask, well, how long is this going to take? There's no answer to how long this is going to take any more. There's an answer to how long will I be in grief. And so I decided, okay, I'm just going to have patience with it. I'm just going to do what I can. I had to ask the universe to help me because, like I said, I'm not very good at it. I need help. Um, I was also talking to my trusted people while I was going through this. So what I did was I wrote letters to him. Whenever I got that hit of anger, I just would pull out that pad of paper and I would write him a scathing letter telling him exactly how I felt about what he had done. And then I would tear up the letter. And years before in that book I read, this person had this prayer that I borrowed. And what I would say is, I forgive you up to God to work in your life. And the first time I prayed that, I said, and give him exactly what he deserves. Right. And then I said, okay, I'll let go. I forgive you up, God, to work in your life. I did that over and over and over. Took me about 9 months. And one day I got that little zing. That zing got a little softer and a little softer over time. I got that zing. I put that pen to paper and I wrote, poor broken man. And I knew, oh my gosh, I'm there. I'm ready to really let go. I'm ready to forgive him. And so I prayed that prayer for him one more time. And I said, I forgive you. And then I went about my business, right? And now, ever so often, somebody would bring it up, right? Because it was grief, something would bring it up. I didn't dwell on it. I just said that prayer again for him and went on about it. And honestly, if he knocked on the door today, here's how I would go about that. If he knocked on that door today and said, hi, hey, could you loan me a couple of $1,000? I would say no. Can we be in relationship? No. Right? I would not want to be in relationship with him because I didn't trust him. And that doesn't mean I haven't forgiven him. Does that make sense? Yeah. I don't have to reconcile with him. But I don't hold the offense against him anymore. I can think about him and actually think of, I hope he got some help. I hope he found a way to heal. Because hurting people hurt people, right? It's one of the reasons that I wanted to heal, was so I wouldn't be a hurting person hurting somebody else. So I would want that for him. I could truly let go of him and the offense at different times in my life. Okay? So what are the benefits of forgiveness? Well, this is what happened in my life. It allowed my broken heart to heal, allowed more joy, returned to harmony. It allowed me to take in more love. I could receive love a lot better. I could give love more freely. And I got a better, richer, fuller life, right? Because I was free of the burden of carrying that pain. One of the things that helped me come to a decision to forgive was I watched a skit one time where this guy got out of bed, got dressed, had his breakfast, got ready for work, grabbed his car keys, and then went over to this great big box. And he opened it and he pulled out all of these mannequins with ropes on them. And he took all of them and he hung them around his shoulders and he piled them all on his back. And then he explained, these are the people I haven't forgiven in my life that I carry around with me. And I thought, man, that's the truth. That's the way that felt, was I was carrying him around with me. And I thought, I'm not going to carry him around anymore. That's it. So that really helped me make the decision to forgive. And I'm really, it's remarkable the change. So here's some homework for you. And I know we're running I'm actually running early. Goodness gracious. We can have some conversation. Would you write for 5 minutes on a nagging guilt or a regret? 5 minutes, that's all. Set your timer. And then when you finish that, I want you to think about, is there a way I can let this go? Is there a way? Is there a ritual? Is there a prayer? Is there some way to let go of this nagging guilt and this regret? Am I ready to let it go? Maybe you're not ready. Maybe you need to do some more on it. Be patient. Be kind to yourself. Honor that feeling. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but if it's there, honor it and work through it. Turn around and face it, right? And be gentle. If you can't do it, don't do it, right? Pay attention. When you're doing this work, I want you to make sure you feel safe, that you're in a good place, that it's comfortable. Sometimes we want people with us. Sometimes we want our pets with us. Sometimes we don't want anybody with us. We just need a blanket and a cup of coffee or tea, right? But what I'd like for you to do with this after you've written it out is decide whether you want to keep that piece of paper or whether you want to tear it up and throw it away. And in symbolizing letting it go. It's like, nope, I've carried this around. I'm not going to carry this around anymore. And both are legitimate. It makes no difference how you want to do this. A lot of people in class want to keep it, right? We always offer the trash can. Do you want to tear that up, throw it away? And a lot of them will say, no, I want to keep it and reread this. I want to do a little more work on this. So it's very helpful because, boy, you can get to it if I go, what is this nagging guilt? What regret do I have? Right? And maybe you just need to write some letters to your loved one. Okay? That's that. Now, on the forgiveness side of this, make a list of the people who've hurt you, whom you need to forgive. And then make a list of the situations where you said something or done something and now you need to forgive yourself. I'll tell you, the hardest person I found to forgive was myself. Still is, right? But here's what I did about, 7 or 8 years ago. I started saying that prayer for myself. I forgive myself up to God to work in my life. I forgive myself up to the universe to work in my life. Whatever that source that is greater than you, that's what I did over and over and over. Every time I thought of something where I screwed up and I just felt guilty, that's what I did, was I said that prayer for myself. And boy, what a difference that has made in my life. I have so much more peace in my life. I heard something this morning. I was, it's sunny and cold here, so it's not snowing. And so I went for a walk before early this morning. And I was listening to an app that I have that's a meditation app. And this guy said something really interesting. He was reflecting on justice as a quietness and rest and an opportunity for the deepest needs of our souls to be met. And I realized, we say there's no justice. We may not see justice when we're forgiving somebody. We may not get to see true justice in our lives. But when they defined justice as peace and quietness and rest, it's like, oh my gosh, we get justice when we're able to forgive because it brings peace into our lives. And maybe that's what they were talking about. I've never heard justice described like that. So I thought that was really cool. So, good question. What's preventing you from forgiving yourself or someone else? Good to examine that. What would change in your life if we were able to forgive? If you're able to forgive yourself or someone else, what do you think would change? Right? Now, some of that may be negative. Well, maybe I would never, maybe my family would be mad at me. Who knows? Right? There's all kinds of reasons we don't forgive. So it's really good to ask that question and figure that out. Okay. So here's my encouragement for you. You can do hard things. You've already done hard things in your life. You have a history of doing hard things. You're not alone, right? Look at the screen. You're not alone. Lots of people. Say yes when help is offered. Ask for help when it's not, right? Help someone else. A lot of times this really makes a difference. When I'm in self-pity, this is really good for me to go help someone else. It gets me out of myself. Get up and go outside. That's helpful too. Again, be kind and compassionate to yourself and others. The world needs more of that, don't you think? It really is. Treat others the way you want to be treated. That's just good stuff right there. Okay. So, is there any question? Where are we? Oh, we're doing fine here.
We're doing great, Joni, and thank you for that. I do just want to, we have a few questions in the queue, but I want to call out a comment of, I'm tired of doing all the hard things. And I think that's a really, really fair sentiment that we can all agree on. And I wanted to speak that out loud because same. I think we can all agree, but the first question we have, and I'd love to get through all four of them if possible. So I want to give you that idea of how many we have.
Okay, I'll go fast.
The first clarifying question is, isn't regret often tied to shame? Or at least, isn't it going to pop up because we are human? Is the trick dismissing shame?
No, I think you turn around and face it, right? You look at it. Is this shame? Is this regret? Am I a bad person? Am I horrible? Or did I make a mistake? Did I just not see something? Is it something that there's no way to know what I know now back then? There's no way. That's regret, right? Guilt. I did something wrong and I knew it when I did it. Those two feelings help us, teach us something. Shame is to be looked at, and honestly, it's like, no, I don't have a place in my life for shame because I made a mistake. I'm not a bad person. And it's really important to separate those, but you don't have to ignore it. I don't ignore it. I just say, nope, I'm not taking it. I'm not accepting that one. But man, yeah, regret, that was it. So it really helps to define it and clarify it. And there's some great books out there. Honestly, Brene Brown is a great source when it comes to vulnerability and shame. She has a 15-minute TED Talk that she made a long time ago that is outstanding on shame and vulnerability. So good.
Oh, good. Joni, before I go to the next question, will you go back to the homework page so people
Of
can take
course.
screenshots?
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay, so next question.
Mm-hmm.
In relation to forgiveness and setting an intention, how
Mm-hmm.
many times may it take?
A million. It's one of those things of you just do it and do it and do it. About a month in, I thought, how long is this going to take? And then I realized it was going to take as long as it needed to. And that experience was 20 years old, right? So it was going to take a while to work through all of that, all of those feelings. It could have been yesterday and taken a long time. It just takes what it takes. Breathe and just keep doing the work. And it feels like you're not getting anywhere, but you are. That every time you do something, you're taking a little step the right direction. You just have to do the next right thing. That's all that's required.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is, if you feel it won't hurt the other person to discuss the topic you want to forgive them for, how do you start that conversation, to be present and wanting to honor their feelings as well as my own?
Okay. If I heard you right, what you said was, how do I talk to the person that I'm going to forgive them? Is that right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. I'm so glad you asked that. Great question. Um, this is not, honestly, I wouldn't talk to them about it. This is not about talking to them about you forgiving them. You have to do the work by yourself. I had someone in class say, hey, I went to the person that I wanted to forgive and I knocked on the door and he came to the door and I said, I want you to know I forgive you. And he said, for what? I didn't do anything, and slammed the door. Right? Because a lot of times the people we're forgiving don't even recognize they've hurt us. Or they won't recognize they've hurt us. They won't own it. And all it does is hurt us again. So that's why this is very important, that this work is for us to do and we don't need anything from them. We don't need a conversation, right? This is for us to do on our own without conversation. Now, someday it may present itself where you can have a conversation with them. But if you try doing that, it's just going to hurt you more. So I would say, no, don't do that. You got to protect yourself, right? And you can do this without having conversation with them. This isn't about whether you're honoring their feelings or anything like that. This is your work to do. This is your experience, not their experience. They may have had a different one, right? Theirs was wrong, but but they have a different experience. But don't set yourself up in a vulnerable position to get hurt by somebody again, right? That's a good boundary. Yeah. Okay.
That was a really helpful one, Joni. Thank you so
Mm,
much.
good.
Um, okay, we have another question I'm going to ask. And then while you're answering this question, Joni, Emma's going to display our end slide as well. So we can
Mhm,
have that displayed for a few minutes before we're done. So
mhm.
our next question is, how do you forgive your deceased dad when you still have nightmares about the abuse,
Oh,
given that he abused this person and their sister for years?
oh my gosh. Well, that's a good question. I wish I had a really good answer for that. The way you do it is very, very gradually. And you do it by, honestly, I would write letters over and over and over and completely tell him exactly what you think of him and what he did and the effect that it had, and process all those feelings through those letters over and over and over, right? And if you can find a way to let go of that, the reason you're letting go of this is for you. not for him, right? Forgiveness is for the victim, not the victimizer. So you're doing this for yourself. So that prayer that I found that I used, I forgive you up to God to work in your life. I forgive you up to the universe to work in your life, frees you. And that's what we're after here with forgiveness. That's what's so cool about this, is that we don't have to, nobody can keep us in that jail cell but us. Your dad has no power over you anymore. And you have the power over self-care, of taking care of yourself and letting your heart heal and doing that work. So that's what I would do. I would write letters over and over and over and over and over and over for as long as it takes, until you feel like you can let that go, let him go, let that pain go, right? And that you can feel your heart healing.
Thank you, Joni.
Sure.
Another question came through, and I think it's a really important one for you to cover.
Okay.
It is one that feels very familiar.
Mm.
And it says, how do you forgive someone for dying? How do you forgive God for letting them die? My mom had dementia and forgot who I was after she promised she wouldn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. That is so painful. What a good question. I think you just go through the same process, honestly. I think you talked to God, you talked to your mom, you said you wouldn't, right? I remember being so mad at Chad for dying. The first time I had to face something by myself that he would do. It's like, how could you leave me? Like he decided to leave me. Like he walked out the door. But it doesn't have to make sense. But that working through that, talk with it, talk with someone about God. I mean, the mysteries of all of this, the anger, I felt that last week. I was walking and with my daughter's diagnosis of breast cancer. I went for a walk, I'm crying, and I'm saying, God, why would you allow this to happen? Right? I'm saying things out loud. And in the same breath, I'm saying, and please hold us close. All of it is true. All of those feelings, these are thoughts. I need to be able to express them outside myself so they can dissipate, so my heart can heal. And it will take as long as it takes, right? But find someone, talk to, if you've got a pastor or a priest, or go to a synagogue, talk to someone about God and how to deal with that, how to work through it. Okay. Good question.
I always say, God can hold your anger just fine.
Oh my gosh, yes.
They can do that. So
that's what I found. Yeah.
We have no more minutes, and I'm so thankful that we got to answer questions live this week. This was a beautiful ending to a really important conversation. Joni, I just appreciate you answering all these questions in real time. I know it's just at the top of people's hearts. So it's lovely to be able to do that today. I do want to encourage everyone to continue to take care of yourselves. This stuff is really hard. Grief is really hard. I believe that it is the thing we will do that's the hardest over and over and over again in our lives. And so please make sure you're taking care of yourself. If you need any additional mental health resources, we are here for you. Please reach out. But otherwise, I want to thank you all for being here. And I want to thank you again, Joni, for just gifting us with your perspective again today. Next week,
honor.
Next week is our final session, if you can believe it. As a reminder, all recordings of this series will be available at the end of the series. So keep a lookout for that as well. And we will see you next week.